Waiters and waitresses of Reddit, what is the most horrible experience you have had with a customer? Guest was incredibly drunk. Couldn't even sit properly anymore, let alone talk. We refused to get him another drink. He threw a glass at my head. Hey. If he can throw a glass, he can dodge a ball. Or something. Anyway. Here's Wonderwall. Had a tray balanced on my shoulder full of food. And I was setting down hot plates to the table. Grandma shook her half-empty glass of tea in my face and asked why she couldn't get any service. Once, when I was working at this insanely popular breakfast joint, my first table of the morning was a seemingly adorable old couple. After going through our specials, at their request, she ordered the duck hash special, and he ordered 2 boring poached eggs on toast. All good. I bring them their food and the guy starts freaking out. You see, I didn't bring him a tablespoon for his eggs. Granted, he didn't ask for one. But according to him, everyone knows that poached eggs are supposed to be served with a tablespoon. I've been a waitress for nearly a decade, and I've served a lot of poached eggs. And I've never heard this rule. Nonetheless, I apologize profusely and tell him I'll go grab him a spoon. No. He yells. My breakfast is ruined now. And then, this grown-ass adult throws his plate of food at me and storms out. His wife gives me a sympathetic smile as she slinks out behind him. And I work the next 8 hours with egg yolk stains all over me. A lady starting smoking crack at the table. And when confronted about it broke the hostess's nose. IHOP or Waffle House? This happened a long time ago. I used to work at TGIF as a busboy and there was this huge group of about 20 people. At the end of their meal, they received the bill. Everyone put in money for what they ordered. They sat there for a while doing the math and finally figured it out. They call their waitress over and say we ain't ordered no gratuity. Show me gratuity on this table. They continued to try and argue and made the waitress cry. Manager had to be called in to explain what gratuity was. Well, they were right about one thing. No gratuity at that table. Waitress here. Had a large bruise, size and width of a hand, on my upper forearm. Super swollen and purple. Had a guy grab my arm and ask, does this hurt? Before squeezing hard. He spent the remainder of his visit making domestic abuse jokes and talking about how he was going to take me home and give me more. Drunk guy with his wife who made jokes about mounting me while the wife just laughed. And then tried to rub my arm. Sidestepped out the way of that though. LPT. Don't touch your server. Someone threatened to get me fired and called me an idiot because the sandwich he ordered on a shift I didn't work had onions on it. When I worked at Subway, a customer threatened to come back and take a bat to my head because I laughed at what I genuinely thought was a joke. You didn't make the club sandwich. Now you are the club sandwich. So I never waited tables, but I was a busboy the entire time I was in high school. We had this family that would come in. Dude and his wife. They're 2 small kids. They seemed like the most ordinary family. But they were like Vishnu. The destroyers of tables. They always left a f-king disaster. Fries everywhere. Shitty all over the floor. I sat and watched as one of the kids put the salt and pepper shakers into a glass of milk. And then watched the dad be like, hey, can Junior have a new milk? He had a little accident. They were both submerged in milk. Fries everywhere. Crumbs everywhere. 1% of the food had been consumed. They screamed the entire time to zero reaction from the parents. It was chaos for the entire hour they were there. Every time. I had to clean this up probably a dozen times before the hostess asked them not to come back. Yeah, they threw a f-king fit. Didn't come back though. Nightmare. I did a stint at Starbucks. They put into the Target I was working at. Had just graduated from my degree program and they offered to let me manage it. It was good money. Of special note, the just graduated bit. Graduated. From college. As had the person I was working with. We made this woman's iced tea wrong. I don't remember why. It was stupid mistake. But those happen. It would have taken all of 30 seconds to remake it. She threw it back across the counter. Literally threw it. Turned to her daughter and said in the most preppy, bitchy, never worked a day in her life soccer mom trophy wife voice. See? This is why we finish high school. Being the manager. I refused her any further service. She thought she had me by the short hairs when she went to get the Target store manager. But when a ton of other customers backed up my story, she was removed from Target. Worked as a bar back. I accidentally dropped a fork on a very drunk dude's foot, who got angry and shook his head and grumbled about it. Shocking, I know. Bits of food fell on the ground as well. So I grabbed a towel to clean it up. I look the man in the eye to let him know I'm on the floor cleaning next to him. He then proceeds to stand up and step on my hand as he walks to the bathroom. It hurt like a bitch. And I yelled out in pain. He didn't acknowledge it at all but chuckled as he walked away. Sadly, there wasn't much I could do. I just got angry and walked to the back to calm down. This is just the tip of the iceberg. I have many more horror stories from the year I worked there. Back when I was a host, I told a man that the wait was 30-45 minutes. He called me a CNT bitch and told me he was going elsewhere. Good luck finding a place that's not on a wait at 6 PM on a Friday. FK. 12 years in the industry. Worked front and back of the house throughout. Definitely more good times than bad. Always tried to defuse situations before they escalated out of control, but a few moments stand out. The best moment was some dad giving me crap about misquoting the price of the lunch special, $1 less, in front of his family. Pulled a buck out of my pocket and dropped it on the table and walked off. Almost got stabbed by another prep cook when he thought the food wasn't coming out fast enough. Walked off that job. Executive chef offers me another 25 cents hour to come back. No thanks. Life is worth more than that. I was working behind a dessert bar. We had a homeless drunk lady that would come in to get drinks, but you have to have food, so she would get clam chowder. She would ask for it to be reheated every 10 minutes but never touched it. The server started to ignore her request to reheat the dish. So the lady took her bread and slammed it into the chowder, spraying it all over the customers and my area. Management kicked her out. A few minutes later a customer came in and said, "Hey, some lady just took a tea in the doorway." We had a horrible experience with every other customer because of one customer. The dude was a regular. Came in at least 4 times a week. And every time would camp in his booth for a solid 3 hours, you know the type. One Friday night, during dinner rush, this guy comes in with a large duffel bag. Not too uncommon. He always brought weird stuff to work on. This time, it was a partially assembled AR-15 kit, which he pulled out, set on the table, and proceeded to continue assembling the kit. Cue mass complaints alarm from other customers while we huddle in the back deciding how to best kick him out without causing even more of a scene. I hate the overly obvious open carry people. Like, if your state only had open carry, then maybe do it with a handgun. Maybe. Concealed carry is better anyways. I like shooting, but those guys just seem like they're out for attention. Also, that's kinda gross because, like, what if gun grease gets on your food? I had an older, and likely quite senile, gentleman hurled his Salisbury steak at my head for not bringing his soup before his meal. He didn't order soup. Had a group of girls speak to my manager and call me a stupid hoe over $0. 13. Basically they ordered a side of fries and one maybe got a lemonade. Anyway, give them their bill and they gave me just enough to cover it since we round to the nearest dollar instead of dealing with coins. Girls flip out over $0. 13, so I go in my bag to scrounge it up. They speak to my manager who refunded them everything, stupid, and they proceed to call me names as they leave their table. I was having a bad day, so it made me upset at the time. Now I find the whole thing laughable. What's laughable is your spineless manager. Guy tries to get my attention, so instead of saying excuse me miss, he intentionally grabbed my ass and then apologized with oh sorry. I was going for your hip. I know I've got a booty, okay. It's not hard to miss. He got kicked out after that, as it wasn't the first time he's done it to other servers in our restaurant. Edit. Mind you, this also happened at a Cracker Barrel old country store in Kentucky. After he got kicked out of our restaurant, we found out a few months later he's also banned from another local establishment in town for, you guessed it, sexually harassing servers. A family of 6 dined and dashed on Thanksgiving. It was already a rough thing to be working a family holiday, knowing my tribe was at home enjoying themselves, but to have to miss out on what should have been a good tip. It was just salt in the wound. At the end of the night, I just cried. All of the servers rallied around me and tried to offer me a portion of their tips to make up for a loss. I couldn't accept it, so they got me drunk and drove me home instead. They are awesome people. Edit. Thanks for the gold. It's my first. One time at my family's barbecue shop, a woman asked me my nationality. She really meant my race, so I just told her I was black and white. She made the biggest stank face, and then said, oh, whatever makes you happy, I guess. I didn't get a tip, but she did write Deuteronomy on the paper. Wish I were religious enough to know what she meant. Just answer American or whatever country it is you live in. It really pisses them off. Not me, but a fellow coworker. He was waiting on an elderly gentleman and his daughter for her birthday dinner. Everything was fine up until said server dropped the check off. The daughter insisted on paying, so the server gave the checkbook to her. Wrong move. The father yelled, WTF you think you're doing, kid? You made the biggest mistake of your f-king life. You'll f-king regret that. Now, since they were a cool table up until that point, the server thought he was joking and let out a little chuckle. Big mistake. The guy went off even more and finally said, you're lucky I'm not younger, I would kick your f-king ass. The daughter was so embarrassed she tipped the guy $50 on a $100 tab. I wouldn't believe this story if I didn't hear it myself. I accidentally spilt a small glass of water on a lady who was dining alone. The place was packed and a customer had banged into me making this happen. I apologized profusely, but she was absolutely vile. She was shouting at me so that the whole restaurant could hear. When she finished, I walked out into the kitchen and explained what I'd done to the manager and my coworker. They started laughing and I started crying and told them how vile she'd been and that I'd usually laugh too but couldn't this time. I told my manager how vile she'd been, and with each word I could see him getting angrier and angrier until he said, where is she? We left the kitchen and I pointed her out. He marched over to her. I don't know what he said, but it involved escorting her out whilst the customers who'd overheard her applauded. To my old manager, Matt, you are a legend of a boss. To the lady, that's why you dine alone. You are a horrible person. Was a waiter for 5 years and the oddest was a guy with dried blood on his shirt and hands. Ordered a coffee but only wanted it halfway filled. Only words he spoke to me. Stayed for less than 5 minutes. Paid with change. And was out the door before I even processed what was happening. Not a waitress, but previously a lady bartender at a theater. On an incredibly busy night, where we are well understaffed, an old guy ordered a Jack Daniels, then proceeded to blank my next 3 questions of would you like ice with that? Whilst chatting with his mates. Other customers are desperately clamoring for my attention. After some thought I put the ice in as it's the more popular option. He then turns back. Looks at his drink. Cold and disgusted says, what the hell is this? I don't want ice. Flustered I fix his drink, apologizing profusely. He still continues to look at me like dirt. Pays, scoffs and walks off. It sounds like a little thing, I know, but I was only 18 and was so shook up by it. A couple ordered food. When I brought it over to them, the guy had his hand up the woman's skirt. I was 16 and too shy to say anything, so I awkwardly put the food down and dashed away as quickly as I could. At the end of the meal, the FK shook my hand, then laughed. I assumed because he knew what he'd been doing. And he knew I knew what he'd been doing. I washed my hands, then pulled a sickie and went home. Edit. I didn't shake his hand by choice. I had to give him his change after he paid. Not a waiter, but went out with the ex and her family for her birthday dinner to an Ethiopian restaurant. Her mom is the queen of passive aggressive, and grilled the waitress for about half an hour. Nothing outright mean, but like I said, mistress of passive aggressive. At one point, the waitress starts screaming, throws her notepad at us and quits on the spot. She ended up coming back, but wouldn't talk to the ex's mom. We all left her and extra $20 tip each. I was new to the job and still finding my feet when I had a guy who was insistent that I wasn't capable of the job due to my dwarfism and kept complaining about inclusive bollocks. What I found frustrating about the whole situation is that I'm not a good waiter, but due to reasons completely unrelated to my dwarfism, poor memory, anxiety, coordination, etc., and he was doubting my competence before I had shown any of these issues. It was purely based on how I looked, but I never felt like I was able to prove him wrong either. That experience really got to me for a long time. Worked at a very popular chain wing place. You all know it. 24 top to myself, with other tables in my section. All separate checks. All mostly cash, which needed change. All trying to pay at the same time. During this frantic moment of me hustling to make change and swipe cards, I have at least 4 of these mother effers trying to sneak out the front door. I saw them, slammed down everything in my hands and chased them all the way to their cars. I confronted one of the girls as she rolled her window up while yelling "FCK you bitch," and peeling out of the parking lot. Forget the rest of them. I went back in. Mind you, no support from fellow staff here. I get back into the rest of the people impatiently waiting for me, and some of them trying to tell me they already paid me when I know they didn't. I was so GD angry that night I vowed to never put myself through that for so little again. So I quit. I love my job now. I witnessed a divorce. Man told his wife, "You just make me f***ing unhappy." He left on his own and she had no money. It was a shitty situation. I think I witnessed one in the grocery store. Over the phone. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but it went from like, "Oh, I'm just getting groceries. What do you want for dinner?" to "But what about the kids? What about me? I didn't go to school because you said you'd take care of me," type stuff, and lots of crying. Poor woman. I had a guy come in and he was smoking. I politely asked him to put it out and he flipped on me. He said he was going to come back that night and kick my ass. Security escorted us to our cars that night. I once was grating cheese on top a blind person's pasta and told her to say when. The looks I received from the other people at the table will haunt me for the rest of my life. I had a couple order 2 bowls of mussels. Take each mussel out of its shell and then cut them up before eating them. When they saw the black stomach of the mussel, among other gross looking inside bits, they started yelling that I, the cooks, as well as the restaurant, were trying to poison people. They would not believe that mussels really do look as awful and horrifying as they honestly do, and under no circumstances should be cut up or analyzed too closely. I ushered them out as quickly as I could. "No bill. Please stop accusing me of attempted murder. It's making everyone here uncomfortable." I had a large party that took my entire section on the patio. It seemed like a family celebration, and after all the joiners arrived they needed tables in another waitress section as well. They ordered lots of food and drinks. They were loud. And they ended up staying for 7 hours, which meant they had a big bill, over $800, that took over the patio, and they were there for my whole shift. This is not necessarily bad because they were celebrating, and for me they were fairly happy customers. However, as you may have guessed, they didn't tip me anything at all when they finally cleared out, and I cried the whole time I cleaned up their huge mess because I had to tip out a percentage of their bill to the kitchen and bar, which meant I had worked my whole shift and was now going home with less than server's hourly wage, which is less than minimum wage. Many of my coworkers were kind and supportive and told me similar stories that had happened to them, but really it was less comforting and more painful to think about how frequently this happens. Abolish the tipping system.